Being from the east coast of Canada, I have done more than my share of taking walks through the woods, through the forest. As a kid, something that I kind of did a lot of is what you did. You just kind of wandered around in the woods and you explored and you played. And so maybe you've done that too, I don't know. What would you do if you were walking through the forest and right in the middle of nowhere, you just came upon a staircase? It was kind of just sitting there, a staircase. It started at the ground, worked its way up, but kind of went to nowhere. Wasn't connected to a house, or it wasn't connected to a piece of property or anything like that. It was just there. That will be pretty strange. Just last week, I was watching a YouTube video about that same thing. People who say they've been taking these walks through the forest in certain places across North America, and right in the middle of nowhere, they just encounter a staircase. Weird. Sitting there, starts from the ground, works its way up, not connected to anything. It's just there in the middle of nowhere. Quite strange. I don't know what you would do if you were walking through the forest and you encountered something like that. Maybe you might be a person that would kind of discover around it, explore around it. For me, that's just a little bit strange. I would probably just run the other way. A little too weird for me. So okay, maybe you've never encountered stairs in the forest. I get that. But most of you encounter stairs every single day. Some of you make it your own personal life philosophy to take the stairs every time you get the opportunity. Some others of us, maybe not as disciplined as you, maybe we aren't so committed, and maybe we'll take the elevator or the escalator or whatever we can do to kind of get around the stairs. Whatever the case, stairs are something that we all have in our lives in some way, shape, or form. And so today we're jumping back into this series that we've been doing called Stuck in the Middle with You. Trusting God in the liminal spaces. Remember liminal, right? It's the in-between spaces. It's the in-the-middle spots. It's not where you started from. It's not the destination. It's the weird in-the-middle transitory kind of space that kind of just serves as a mechanism not to take you back where you've been, but to kind of get you where you're going. It's no destination on its own. It's kind of in the middle. It's liminal, which is Latin for threshold. It's the in-between threshold space from that separates where you've been to where you are going. And so they take you from point A to point B, but on their own, they're nothing. They're kind of like the stairs, right? Stairs aren't destinations. Who do you know that kind of hangs out in the staircase? Okay, well maybe I better reframe that, because I'm the one right now, the weird guy hanging out in the staircase. But most of us, we don't hang out in the staircase, in the stairwells, on the steps. These are just things that kind of get us from the bottom floor to the top floor. These are the pieces that take us from the lower level to the upper level. On their own, they're nothing. They're just the in-between space that kind of they even have a weird sound. Do you hear it? I bet you all do. The staircase is just a weird in-between liminal spot where even sounds bounce around with nowhere to go. Just a weird space. All steps, all stairs move us in between point A and point B. And on their own, they're nothing. But they aren't necessary. They're liminal. They get us where we are going. So I love this poem that I found. And I'm not like a real poetry guy. I'm not that good at it. I appreciate it, but I certainly don't write poetry. But I came across a liminal poem. Here it goes. A liminal poem about a staircase. And it says this: halfway down the stairs is a stair where I sit. There isn't any other stair that is quite like it. I'm not at the bottom and I'm not at the top. So this is the place where I always stop. Halfway up the stairs isn't up and it isn't down. It isn't in the nursery and it isn't in the town. All sorts of funny thoughts run around in my head. Stairs isn't really anywhere. It's somewhere else instead. They're strange. They're in between. They're liminal. So these liminal places aren't just physical locations around us. They are moments, they are seasons that we also go through in our lives. It's not where you started, and it's not even where you hope to be. It's the weird in-between middle space that nothing kind of seems to make sense sometimes. It's very foreign, it's very weird, it's strange. It's the awkward in the middle spot. There are tons of them, tons of those liminal spaces in this life, right? When you're in between jobs and you kind of don't know what's going to happen and what's going to come your way next, or you're a teenager, you've just finished high school and you're waiting on post-secondary, or you're trying to find a job, or you're just trying to navigate what the next step is in your life. It's the in-between, right? Or you're a person that's had some medical tests, and now you're waiting for the call from the doctor's office. It's the weird in the middle. You're kind of thinking about, what does my future look like if this call goes one way or the other? You don't know. You're in between. It's liminal. Or you're a person, you're just in a midlife crisis. You're just in that space where you look back and you think that lots of your life has passed. You're looking ahead at what maybe some of your more senior years are looking like, and you're in that in-between pocket, and you don't kind of know what the future is going to look like, and you're kind of nervous. You're a little apprehensive about it. It's liminal. Or you're a person who's entering retirement, right? You just finished your career, and now you're kind of looking at, what does retirement look like for me? You're kind of trying to figure the pieces out. They're weird, they're new, you've never done it before. You're in that middle spot and nothing seems to make sense. There are tons of those liminal spaces in life, right? But the thing about these are, and we haven't talked about them yet, that most of the liminal spaces that we run into in our lives are ones that we can't stop. They just happen because we grow older, because we mature, because we go through different stages of life. Liminal spaces happen and we can't control them. But of course, as human beings, we have got this crazy thing called the ability to make choices, otherwise known as free will. And that causes us some problems, always kind of has. And so today I want to talk about the liminal spaces that happen to us, the uncomfortable in between, the threshold moments that happen not because of a stage of life, but the uncomfortable liminal moments or seasons that happen because of a choice, a deliberate choice that you or I made. Those are liminal seasons too. They're real and they're not as clean and easy as some of the ones we've talked about so far. If you have never made a bad decision in your life that's launched you into this crazy season of liminal space, then congratulations. You've got a good track record so far. Stick with the plan. However, if you're like me, and lots of people that I know, we've made a few bad decisions along the way, and they have unleashed some of these crazy, awkward, fear-packed, discouraging liminal seasons in our lives where we just didn't know what to do. And if that's you, welcome to the human herd. I remember my grade 12 year of high school, getting ready to graduate and going to university. A math placement officer. Now, doesn't that sound like a fascinating career? A math placement officer, and I'm sorry if you're watching this and you're a math placement officer, but a math placement officer came to our school and gave an exam to all the grade 12 graduates to get a sense of where their math skills were, so that when they went to university in the fall, they would know what courses to best register them for, which was fantastic. And they told us you don't even need to study for this, which I thought, bonus test I don't need to study for? Love it. So the test was Saturday morning. Showed up on the Saturday morning to write the test. Took the advice quite literally. Did not study at all. Wrote the test, thought that I aced it. Of course I aced it. Easy peasy. 3 months later, I roll into university and I'm getting ready to register. It's my first day and I'm registering for classes. You didn't register online back in those days. I don't know if there was any line back in those days. But we were registering. And I remember selecting the math course, Math 1080, which was like the entry-level calculus kind of class, which all of us wanted to take because it was kind of all my pocket of friends were leading towards the sciences, engineering, that kind of stuff. So we needed the 1080 math to kind of start the university track that way. And I remember selecting the class, Math 1080, and I remember the person behind the desk saying, "Oh, just a moment, Mr. Sims, there's something here on your file." And when they pulled open my file, they said, "Well, according to the marks that you scored on your math placement test, you don't qualify for Math 1080. And I'm like, "Well, just wait a minute. That's not what we were told. We were told it didn't count." Well, apparently it did count. They said, "The course that's best suited to you, Mr. Sims, is Math 102F. Now, doesn't that just sound like something special? Math 102F. And so all my friends were kind of off and registered for Math 1080. They were doing they were on their way, on the track. And here I was, Math 102F. My first day in class, I discovered that this class was not even worth a university credit. They didn't even give you a credit for doing it. And I remember my first day kind of looking around the class, and the teacher stands up and starts giving us an introductory lecture on decimals and fractions. I'm like, decimals and fractions, all right. I thought this was stuff we were supposed to nail down in grade 7 or 8, but maybe I missed something along the way. 102F, because of a decision that I had made 3 months earlier. But now, thankfully, that liminal season's passed. I'm thankful for it. Thankful for Math 102F even to this day, because now I'm like an expert at decimals and fractions. And in case you don't know, like the stats will tell you, 8 out of every 6 people in the world struggle with fractions. Thankfully now, because of Math 102F, I'm not one of those people. Maybe you have tossed yourself into an awkward liminal space because of a decision that you made that wasn't the greatest decision. But here's some comfort for you. You're not the first person to do this. I'm not the first person to do this. The very first people whose names were recorded on the pages of history, they were the very first ones to thrust themselves into a season that was liminal because of a terrible decision that they made. Wasn't you. You didn't start this. I didn't start this. The very first humans did this. We now, because we're part of the human race, we have learned how to do this. This is what we do. And so whether you've been a church-going person your whole life, or whether today is your very first Sunday, and if it is, I'm so glad that I get the opportunity to talk to you today. No matter where you come from in your experience on this, you've probably heard about the story of Adam and Eve. You've probably heard of the story of the Garden of Eden. You've probably heard about this whole narrative, this whole story that tells about how these people ate this fruit, God didn't like it, and God kicks them out of this garden. You've probably heard of that story. And if you haven't, Google it right now. Google Genesis 2 and 3. It will blow your mind. So the summary goes like this. They had it made in the shade, literally. They had a perfect relationship in a perfect garden with a perfect God. And the Bible says, this story tells us that every tree in that garden was pleasing to the eye and was good for food. They had it made. They could have taken from any of them. But of course, God says, don't touch the tree in the middle. That one you can't touch. And we know the story, right? They take of the one tree they're not supposed to, and then God does a thing where he launches them into the most intense, painful season of liminal space that humanity's probably ever experienced before. It's such an intense season of liminal space that Adam and Eve now go into. We don't even really think about it a whole lot in the context of this story. So we don't really fully explain it, but we fully are entered into it. It's a weird space. Let me see if I can use my tablet to help you make some sense of this. So here we go. Their stay in the perfect relationship with a perfect God in this perfect garden is now officially over. Unfortunately, the stay was short, too short. We don't know how short, but it was short enough. The story says that God ejects Adam and Eve from this garden and sets an angel and a flaming sword at the entrance just to be sure that they don't get back in. But this isn't the end of this first couple. They are about to be the first humans to enter a new liminal in-between space. The first ones. The garden is over. They have crossed this new threshold. They are never going back there, ever. They are now in this new unknown space. Everything is new and changed. They're foreigners here in every sense. You want to talk about unsettling? Of course it's unsettling. It always is. It's liminal. But they put themselves here. Now there's living and learning for them to do. And here in this new space, new things happen. Lots of them. One of the first things we see is Cain and Abel are born to them. Their first sons are born. Interesting story. Because of jealousy, which is also a new thing, Cain kills Abel. And Cain is so distraught about what he did and what God now thinks of him, Cain wanders now in this liminal space, basically lost for the rest of his life. At the age of 130, God gives Adam a new son whose name is Seth. And we're told in this story that Seth is believed by Adam to be a son God gives him to replace the son he lost in Abel. Yeah, God does this at 130. We're told in this story that Adam and Eve have more sons and daughters, and then Adam dies in liminal space. He dies in liminal space. At the age, here it comes, 930. So Adam spends at least 800 plus years of his life in liminal space. So yeah, you might have thought that your liminal space was long. Adam spends most of his life in this liminal space because of a decision he made. There's tons of learning and pain in this space. His relationship with God absolutely changed for the worst. He lost one son to murder and another son to simply become a lost wanderer. We're told in Genesis chapter 3 that one of the results of Adam's choices that he made inside the garden was that now every time he touched the ground outside of the garden, in the new liminal space for growing food, it would now be hard work. It would be labor-filled work. It would be a curse. Where before, in the garden, that was a delight. 800 plus years of liminal space that brought so much pain into the life of Adam. And it's a liminal season that he could have avoided if he had simply chosen differently. What a mind-blowing, intense story. These liminal spaces can be so confusing, so awkward, so painful. And one of the reasons they can be so painful is when these liminal seasons are brought on by a decision that we made. We spend lots of time reflecting on how good we had it before we made the decision that triggered the liminal space. Can you imagine how Adam lives like 800 plus years in that liminal space? Every single day able to remember how good he had it in the garden, how perfect things were, how good things were with God and the beautiful garden he had created, and none of the consequences of this crazy thing that he did. He could remember that garden every single day of an 800 plus year liminal space. That's the hard thing about these liminal spaces that we put ourselves into sometimes because of decisions that we've made. We can reflect back on how good, or at least how better things used to be. They might not have been perfect. In Adam's situation, though, they were. Maybe not in ours. But lots of times they were better. And we reflect, we compare, we want to go back and live where we were before, and we can't. We've made the decision, and we can't go back and change some of that stuff. It's painful. How many days did Adam think about thinking how good it was, looking back from east of Eden? Maybe that's where you are today. Looking back at the garden that maybe you had, and now you don't have it anymore. Many of us know that feeling. All kinds of trees grew in this garden, right? All pleasing to the eye, the story tells us. All good for food, good situation. But Adam had to eat of the fruit of that one. And it's in the Genesis story, right? It's in this epic saga when Adam and Eve kind of eat from the tree that they weren't supposed to. There's this phrase in there, and you can Google this too. It says their eyes were opened. Their eyes were opened. I'm not sure the depths of what that means, but it's a powerful statement. Their eyes were opened. But I kind of think that their eyes were really opened. I mean, really opened, truly opened, widely opened, when God kicks them out. And they land in this new liminal space, and they experience the pain and the loss, and they realize how good they had it before. That is a real eye-opener. Maybe your eyes have been opened. Maybe for the first time. Maybe it's not been 800 plus years in a liminal space, but it certainly seems like a long time that you've been there. And there's pain, lots of it. There's pain in relationships that are broken. Maybe a relationship with another person, a relationship with someone that you're close to. Maybe it was a relationship with a spouse or one of your kids or a close friend or a coworker that's kind of in shambles. Maybe it's pain in earning a living where before you had a great job and then you made a decision and things changed, and now what you're doing is kind of not what you want to do, but it's what you have to do, and every day is now like the grind of just doing it when before you had a pretty good situation. Now you don't have it. Or maybe it's the pain in this season of not sensing God's closeness like you once did. Not sensing that intimacy with God like you once did. Maybe you can remember the days when you used to be engaged with a church. You were engaged in a church community. You were engaged in scripture and all that stuff. And then you made a decision of some form. It was a season or a weak moment or something just kind of happened that kind of was out of your control, and you made a decision that launched you into this liminal, painful season where now you're not close to God like you used to be. It happens to the best of us. Happened to the first couple. Happened to Adam and Eve, and it happens to us, doesn't it? It's unfortunate, but it's real. Liminal spaces of our own choosing oftentimes cause us pain, the likes of which we never ever chose to walk through. But now we're in it, trying to figure out how to process it. And it seems so long that 800 years kind of seems like 3 months for you now. It's painful. It's hard. It's liminal. Sometimes, friends, liminal space just doesn't resolve neatly. Sometimes these liminal spaces just don't kind of end in some miraculous transformation that we just want to see happen. Sometimes liminal spaces are just messy from the beginning right to the end of them. Sometimes we choose for miraculous, pain-free deliverance from a liminal season. And sometimes it just doesn't happen the way that we kind of thought that it would. The liminal season brings more pain than we thought that we were able to deal with. The very first people created these liminal spaces. They will not be foreign to the human experience. Our very first ancestors walked in them, and we will walk in them. They started in the garden, they got ejected from the garden, and then they waited the rest of their lives to kind of see if they would eventually be reunited with their Creator. And the weird thing in the Bible is this, that there's no indication that over the course of Adam's 930 years of living, that his relationship with God was really restored in any way. He probably lived out the rest of his days contemplating what it was that he had lost. And that's a painful truth. It's a sad truth. And sometimes liminal space is like that, especially when it's one that we brought on ourselves. The decision that Adam made such a liminal space mess that it just didn't wreck his life, but it impacted our lives too. The Bible tells us it separated us from God to such a degree that God sent Jesus into the world thousands of years later to die as a sacrifice for our sins, for Adam's mess up in that garden, that we can be drawn close to God. But it happened thousands of years after Adam. So did Adam benefit from that? I don't know. Did Adam's life change in the season he was in because of what Jesus would do a couple of thousand years later? I don't know. The Bible doesn't really say. It's a liminal space that's left kind of unclear. It's left kind of open-ended. There's no clean, easy tie-up to that whole situation. Liminal spaces are sometimes like that. I don't know how Adam's life changed in light of all that with Jesus. I don't know. But I do know this, that your situation can change. I do know this, that because of Jesus Christ, no matter what liminal season we find ourselves in, and no matter what decision that we made that may have unleashed a fierce, crazy liminal season in our spaces and in our lives, I do know that Jesus Christ wants to be there with you. And even though he may not fix every single situation, and there may be seasons of pain and things that you will have to walk through simply because of the consequences of our actions sometimes, but Jesus says he'll be there with us. He'll walk through those liminal seasons with us. And even when those liminal seasons don't tie up nicely at the end, and there's no great miracle that just makes it all make sense, he's with you in the liminal space, in the pain and in the fear and in the broken stuff. He promises to be there with you. The Bible actually says he's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Maybe you're in a liminal space right now that even your family is estranged from you. And that's painful. The Bible says that Jesus will walk with you so close, he won't abandon you. He'll stick closer to you than even a brother would, no matter what decisions you have made that have impacted your lives in crazy, painful ways. Jesus is there. He chooses to be. He wants to be with you in those spaces. Ask him today, friends, to just step into your life and be with you. Walk with you through the good and the bad. He'll bring joy in the midst of the pain. He'll bring peace when you're not in a peaceful season at all. That's what he does. He might not fix the season the way that you think the season could be fixed, but he'll walk with you through it, because that's who he is. He's with us. He's with you. Right where you are today, right now. Friends, we're in this together. We're in it with Jesus. Jesus is here. He's with you. He's with me. So friends, welcome to the staircase.